The Missing Witches Project is entirely listener supported, and listener, we want you to join us. Do you want to be part of a community that helps make public research into marginalized ideas? Do you want to join in interviews with all these magical people and meet other anti-racist, trans-inclusive, neuroqueer, feminist practitioners of different kinds from all over the world in our monthly circles? Or are you maybe just down to send a little money magic towards these stories and ideas and the causes we support? Anyway, either way, check out missingwitches.com to learn more about us. And please know, we've been missing you. And one last thing before we start. The stories we tell require a general content warning. It's just a fact of this terrain of interrogating what is missing. We promise to hold those moments with care.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
I'm going to take a deep breath. Such a fan and follower of your work. I consider you one of these few touch points for me in people who I admire so much for combining a really intelligent activism with their witchcraft. And also, I really appreciate how open you are on your own podcast about your own neurodiversity, setting your own boundaries. You're really, really clear about capacity. And I think there's so much for us all to learn in how to get that balance right to make a living and work together to defeat capitalism and be really respectful of these strange bodies we're in. So those are the things I think about when I get to sit down with you. I learned so much from you last time we were together. I just think you're so rad. So thank you so much for coming back and welcome to the Missing Wishes podcast.
Oh, it's just my pleasure. You know that I'm a major fan and admirer of your work, and I just respect what you've done. You and Amy, of course, Missing Witches. I'll just say Missing Witches has done so much to reinvigorate this careful, considered scholarship and lineage, which I think, especially like in these, I mean, I'm pretty old, right? I'm 41. In these social media times, I think it can be easy to erase a lineage or to forget about context and to not understand why certain things have been not spoken about, certain people have not been acclaimed. And like, I'm such a also big fan of giving people their flowers while they're alive. And obviously with many of the folks that you highlight in your project, they're not alive. Their memory is alive and their memory lives on and their memory is a blessing. And I think that that care and that compassion, it really shines through your work. And it's ancestral, it's celebratory, it's analytical, it's not afraid to admit that it doesn't know, or when things are ambivalent, you know what I mean? Like there's an openness and a generosity within all of it that I find often missing, that whenever I find it, I feel comforted, because it can feel very lonely. And, you know, anytime I can kind of find other folks in the world who have similar values and ethics, it's like a little light that I can kind of be reminded of, oh yes, like other people care, you know, other people are wondering about the same things I'm wondering about. Other people are grappling with complexity and not turning away from complexity. You know, this is the time of year where I start downloading themes for next year and sort of tune in and tap into what we might be expecting energetically, collectively for next year. And one of the big ones that just keeps like coming in is conflict, and being able to hold conflict internally, being able to have conflict with other people that doesn't result in severing, but it results in deepening. And the other piece that's really coming in really, really loudly for next year is accountability. And I think there's a real lack of it, which is why it's sort of coming in. And so the reason why I'm saying this is, you know, a lot of your work I have witnessed as accountable work, not in a punitive carceral way. That's the other thing about these words. Whenever they come in, for me, I know it's time for me to, or I know that the collective, or that there will be others unpacking the meanings of these kinds of words, because they're so loaded and we've been taught to define them or be in relationship with these harder subjects in very binary ways, in very indoctrinated ways, in ways that, again, sever or distance ourselves from ourselves or our own intuition or various relationships we're in. And I'm really interested in like widening my own capacity within myself to be able to sit with defining what they mean for me personally, spiritually, ethically, and integrity, and really kind of going away from a reaction to one of the themes of the Lover's Year, as I'm sure you know, if you're into tarot. It's like we can't define ourselves by what we're against, and we can't define ourselves by reacting to someone else's set of rules or someone else's definitions or parameters. And I really had to grapple personally, and I'm still grappling, and I'm practicing because this is how we integrate these lessons of love, which is what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about love. What are you for? What are you moving towards? And how are you creating new definitions through your practices and through your actions, right? So for me, I really noticed how much I complain. I really noticed how indoctrinated I am to respond or react or define myself like anti-capitalist, which I really want to talk about with you, like, because I know you did a book about it. Yeah.
The new book. Yeah.
Let's do like, let's go there next. I'll stop. Yeah. I'm going to like wrap it up and then ping it back to you about your thoughts. So I love the word anti-capitalist. Right now, I don't love, and I'm unpacking all of this and I'm unraveling it. And it's always going to be a work in process for me. Where I am now is not where I'm going to be a year from now. I'm not super into like capitalist critical or like, what do they call it? Like green capitalism, like all of these sort of like middle roads, because I don't want to live in a world where the values are greed, where the values are extraction, where in order for me to be okay, someone else has to not be okay, and so on and so forth. And I think it's really important for us to be accountable to what we believe and the ways in which we're putting those beliefs into action, which is why I like that term, because it's like, no, I don't want this system as it is practiced today. I don't want domination. I don't want hierarchy. I don't want to work 5 days a week, 6 days a week. I don't want to. And I love what I do. I don't want to work all the time. You know, no one out here is dreaming of more labor. I'm not, at least. There was a time when I again was like very influenced by like, you know, I'm from New England. It's a puritanical work culture. My parents have very little money. You know, I've been working since I was 12. There's a pride in work where I came from. It's like, well, just deal with it, like get it together. It's very bootstrap and not in a rich way, in like, figure it out, get that second job, knock on a door, talk to someone in a gas station and see if they need work. Literally things my parents would tell me to do that I did, right? So just saying like, hey, I don't want this way of relating to other people. I really dislike transactionalism, and it's rampant in this world, and it's rampant in the spiritual world and the witch world, like rampant. I don't want to relate to people based off what I think they can give me related to hoarding or, you know, clout or financial resources. Like, I want to relate to you because I think you're rad. I think you're interesting. I really like the way you make a podcast. I want to be in conversation with you. I want to continue a conversation. And I want to be in the moment and enjoying the moment and relating to you energetically in a reciprocal, respectful fashion. Right. And that's how I make a lot of my choices, which is also why I often feel alienated, because I'm not like, oh, yeah, I don't want to play these games. I know what I would have to do if I wanted XYZ in this structure. And I don't really want to do that, you know, and I don't even want to like try to feel better about trying to do it, you know? And sometimes when I get, oh, poor me, or like, why haven't I gotten that thing? Or why aren't I, like those sorts of things that we all can default into because that is capitalist. It's like compare and like, well, they have this thing. Why can't I have this thing? You know, I'm a human being, right? I have those moments. I'm like, Sarah, you don't even, if you wanted that thing, you would have to do all of these things. And you don't want to do the things because they're not in alignment with your integrity. So like, just chill, you know? So there's that too, because I'm also very much process oriented. And if I'm not enjoying a process, it's going to be difficult for me to be motivated if I don't like believe in the process of what I'm doing. So I want to talk about anti-capitalism with you. I want to talk about your personal values. I want to talk about like some of the things you've discovered and uncovered for yourself and how we can have these conversations and also learn from each other. So I'm going to drink my turmeric wellness tea and listen to you.
It's so funny. That's one of my favorite things about having like a really good podcaster on our podcast is inevitably you come with questions for me. I kind of love that. I am thinking a lot about anti-capitalism these days. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about some of the practicalities of it, right? Like I'm interested in basic income, universal basic income. I'm interested in housing first as a movement. You know, I think those movements and activism around those movements is witchcraft because it is anti-capitalist, because we are defeating a system that tells us that if you don't have enough to live, you don't deserve to live. And that's poison and a lie. You know, you deserve the bounty of this earth as much as every being does, you know, and I believe in reparations are core to that project too. Those are some of the really, really practical ways I'm thinking about it these days. I think about open source a lot. And I think when we talk about the commons, we talk about the commons a lot in witchcraft, right? Because it's being broken from the commons and then turned against the people that were resisting that movement. That's one of the origins of our story. So we have that idea of the commons and the poverty of the commons in common with these like nerds writing code together. Like we're allies in a way that is a kind of witchcraft what they're doing. And so I think for me, like reaching deeply into places where this resistance isn't just reactionary, as you said, I thought that was so right. Like I want to be in a lover's relationship with changing the world. I'm not somebody who wants to burn it all down. I want to be those roots that are like sort of taking over the tree that takes over the roads, you know? Like I want to be a part of that movement that is living and sustaining and loving and making love with the world as it is with an idea for the future.
Yeah, I want to like make such a beautiful little garden for myself that's so sustainable and so enjoyable that there are extra flowers always for people to have and for people to enjoy. And more, I want to learn how to do it not at the expense of other aspects of my life and other aspects of my health and other aspects of my well-being. And I think that we are in a very particular time where there is the potential more than ever for more people to use the technologies and to use the education that we can have access to by way of the internet to become more abundant and to learn from each other. One thing I've really been struggling with, like big time. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm always struggling with many different things, but one of the themes that keeps coming up for me is like really unraveling my own participation in a certain idea of how work is supposed to look and like how work is supposed to be. It's very indoctrinated in me, really embedded in me to like work 5 days a week and like feel guilty if I take an afternoon off, or just because I've worked for so long and I'm at this weird point too, which I think makes sense where, or it's not weird. I'm at the point where I have worked for myself almost as long as I've worked for other people. So I'm like, wait a minute, we don't have to do it this way. Why are we doing it this way? Like, why am I doing this way? So I've been doing a lot of questioning and really trying to unpack my own foundations, which makes perfect sense because we're going into a tower. So next year is going to be numerologically, and from a tarot archetype perspective, we're going into a chariot year. And as a tarot scholar, I always look at the teacher card of the year we're going into, and the teacher card of the chariot is the tower, because the chariot teaches us how to be change. God is change. It helps us navigate change and be change at the same time. It's a very enlightened archetype. It's about taking the etheric and the ethereal and the cosmic and materializing it while in motion, which, by the way, is really difficult to do if you've ever tried. It's been one of the major projects of my life that I come back to over and over again, because it is, to me, it's about relating to our natural way of being. And it's also about embodying our supernatural ways of being, which we all have, so long as we are in relationship with nature, intuition, the cosmos, our guides, deities, our ancestors, the collective. That's how we become supernatural, right? So, and we already are. It's not anything we have to force. I want to be really clear about that too, because that's a shadow of chariot, and I'm a chariot. That's my number. So I'm like really, really, really intimate with the shadow as well as the potential. The tower, we can't move forward and navigate if our foundations are not in integrity. However that looks, it's different for every person. We're all our own unique flowers. What works for me isn't going to work for you, actually. And that's beautiful. That's also why we can't look to, I love that Deanne de Prima quote. I'm going to paraphrase it. Like, we need as many people as possible trying to pull this thing down, trying to tear this thing down. And like, you have a different way. Like, yours is open source. Mine is like, I want to grow a beautiful garden and make beautiful, magical products for people so that they can navigate their own waves. They can navigate their own tide pools. They can navigate their own rapids, as well as that of the world. We all have our different ways. Yours might be working with kids in a preschool. Yours could be like being an amazing caretaker to a family member who's really sick. Like, there's no end of the ways. And this isn't a hierarchy. Like, it's not like, oh, this is the better thing, or it's not like that at all. But we have to really think about integrity and what integrity means to us. And especially when we're making major decisions, especially when we're making decisions that are going to impact long periods of time for ourselves, the world, and for those we're in committed relationship to, whether that's our ancestors, whether that's ideals or activists or our best friend, right? Or our inner child, or our future wise self, and so on and so forth. And so I've been thinking a lot about what integrity means for me and how I can become more in integrity so that I might be more adaptable. Because I think we're really being called to do that in these times on all levels.
You're someone who thinks so actively and so out loud, so publicly about how you think, which I think is,
I do.
yeah, you do. Yeah, I mean, you're doing it now. You think a lot about how you think. I think like you talk a lot about your ethics. You talk a lot about how you're going to think about coming into relation, or how you're going to think about being in the world, you know? Like how do we adjust to each other, and how do we learn from each other's ideas? It's funny that you question that, because I find it something that I really learn from you, is that you think a lot out loud about your own process of thinking. And I think, like, you know, when we talk about figuring out the ethics of this next year or this next stage that we're going to be in, we could all use some time. You know, thinking is a materialist practice, as we talked about in an earlier episode. Donna Haraway said, we could all use some time to really think. Can you talk about some of the ways? I mean, I know you're a tarot scholar. Some of the the things you use to think, and that maybe we could learn from you.
Well, I have a lot of different ways. I study the Kabbalah with a rabbi, and the more that I learn about Jewish mysticism, the more helpful it is, because I'm like, how much do I share? I was raised Reform Jewish, and my experience was that I was not raised with many forms of Judaism, like many forms of all religions, have clear edicts for how to live and clear philosophies. So I was introduced to, doing mitzvahs and, trying to heal the world and trying to repair the world, and all of those altruistic things that are at the heart of all world religions. So there was that. But I didn't have a lot of philosophical and mythical and mystical and magical learnings until about 4 or 5 years, a little, whatever, until more recently in my life. And in between those, I learned a lot about witchcraft, and I learned a lot about the occult, and I learned about that all from a Western perspective. And learning more about Jewish mysticism, I've become aware of how much of it I already learned through Western occultism, but there was absolutely no citation. It's been completely,
Yes, I'm gonna
it's
unmute just to say yes. I see
it's
that all the
it's
time with
been
Jewish mysticism.
completely culturally appropriated by witchcraft, the lesser banishing, right? Like that's an example of like people saying Jewish words. They have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what they're calling in. They have no idea the energies that they're dealing with. And these are major energies. Like, people study these for their lifetimes. Like another example is I had no idea that angels were Jewish. And I always sort of associated angels with Christianity. And this is, to be really clear, that's not bad or good. It just, I was like, oh, this isn't for me. Like, I don't have a relationship with angels. And then I started learning, well, no, angels were Jewish. And of course, there's angels in Islam, and there's angels in many, again, like, I'm not saying I just want to have, nuanced here and be clear. And so once I realized that, and once I started learning about the connections that ancient Judaism had with angels and healing and protection, and I started working with that energy, it was beautiful and it was magical. So a framework, a Jewish mystical framework, also just certain tenets in Jewish mysticism that are in many other religions and many other philosophies, that I think is really beautiful, is that you show gratitude to God for living in joy and bliss in Judaism. It's not some time to make the donuts or like gotta repent. It's like, how beautiful can I make my garden? How beautiful can I make my life? I'm so grateful to be alive. And that does not mean feeling indebted or guilty. It means like enjoying things. And when I learned that, I was like, I never was taught that, like growing up within the context of. So that helps position me quite a bit. And of course, I'm always reading And I'm always in conversation in my mind or with my partner. My partner is like one of the smartest people I've ever met. So I'm always in conversation with my partner. And I've been blessed enough to have a couple of really good friends who care about the same kinds of things. And so we'll have those conversations, I'm always just trying to really parse out who is doing the thinking, what part of me is doing the thinking, and why, and how I can then, it's very Witchcraft 101, how I can bring the etheric into the material. How can I be like, okay, well, this is my belief, and because this is my belief, I'm going to try this thing. Or like, I love always, I call it's a joke, a running joke that I have with some of my friends and my partner, like, oh, why don't I try following my own advice? We already know, witches already know that there is a procedure and that there is a process to transformation and change. And it looks different for every individual based on their own life and where they are and their resources and their beliefs. But for example, I'm like, oh, right, I'm feeling ready for a change. I'm feeling like I'm ready for a new chapter of my life. Witch 101 is like clear out, like just clear your house, your schedule, say no, right? Like that's 101. We all know nature loves a vacuum. And if it's time to compost, it's time to compost, which is, we know this. And so I'm like, oh, yes, I know what to do. And so for me, that's very comforting because I've done it so many times before. I understand it innately. I know that it works. So that's what I can always turn to when I'm depressed or confused or unsure. The other thing I really love about witchcraft, I mean, we could be here all day. We are taught from a young age, at least in like a lot of the school systems in America, not all of them, but many, we're taught from a young age that like we have to know. If we don't know the answer, we're bad, we're going to fail, we should be ashamed. Witchcraft is much more interested in the questions. Like I love the Rilke quote, like living the questions, much more interested in the mystery. You don't have to know all the time. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be in the dark. That's part of it. You're not off the path. You're not bad. You're not wrong. We're always going to have things we'll never know about. Like I trip out all the time on how in this lifetime, I'll never know myself all the way because I'm always changing. I'm like, wow, this is true. No wonder I get to have like all these different lives. Like, I'm not going to totally know all the different aspects of myself, right? I want to know and I want to experience, but I won't be able to. It's just not possible because we're so multifaceted. So like, that's why these are the kinds of life-saving practices and thoughts that help me formulate, how I want to think about things. And also, which has been a big project for me personally, is like how I want to feel about things and where my body is giving me wisdom and how my heart wants to feel, and the power of what happens when I really tune into my heart and how much of a guide that can be. Because the thinking mind, which I'm like really good at, I have a Gemini moon in tropical astrology. I'm very airy. I'm very mercurial. I have like lots of Mercury in my astrological chart. I can really just stay there. And that's not useful. I need to put it into practice and it needs to feel embodied. And I'm allowed to get messages from the plants. I'm allowed to get messages from my guides. I'm allowed to get messages from water, from my heart, from my meditations, from the hummingbirds. The messages get to come in and my mind doesn't have to judge them and my mind doesn't have to sort them. I get to not be in my like thinking mind or my fixing mind, which is often a defense mechanism, trying to solve a problem that often doesn't even exist. So I have really found that like heart practices and embodiment practices like somatics or yoga, or I've been boxing this year and I've been deadlifting and weight training. That's been really useful for me as someone who is so cerebral and who can live there really easily. I need the different elements. I need earth to ground me. I need water. And I really need fire. So these are just some things I've been thinking about that we all have at our disposal and we all have in our witch life toolkit, you know?
I do know. I mean, I was just saying to Mark, like, we've been so anxious. We're in this overwhelm of loss right now with his mother dying of cancer. It's happening in the next days. We've just been in this mounting feeling, and we've just been staying in this terror place a little bit, this anxious functioning place, you know? And we were both like, we need to run again and like have a lot of sex and like just like after this is done we need to somehow come back into our bodies to process what has happened, you know? So I really relate to the needing to come back into some kind of balance between these elements of the self to. And I love what you said about I need to think about which me is thinking, because there are so many of these voices, you know. Some of them are running back and forth across my head right now. My kid just came home and it's loud, but so many voices in me and so many roles to play to try to piece out, and parents and grandparents and ancestral voices and ancestral fear and guilt. And yeah, so turning to that witch kit is definitely a lifesaver for me. So thanks for reminding us about that. This is a funny backwards way to do this, but I wondered if for a last question, I think our audience knows who you are because, you know, we've celebrated your work so many times and you have a large platform based on your incredible work. But I wondered if, I wondered if you would reintroduce yourself. It's a closing question, and it's like, how are you and who are you these days? If we want to leave this feeling like we actually got to be with you, what is the you that you want us to learn from and carry with us?
You know, I'm just a little like 5'2" Jewish lady living in LA. I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I think a lot. I share. I'm a channel. I'm a psychic. I care a lot. I'm a care bearer. And I'm just a human being, you know? I don't know what else to say. I feel very in flux right now. You know, I've been really meditating on the trap of identity. I'm in a 4-year, which is an emperor year. So I'm very much, and it's a death year. Like death is the teacher of the emperor because obviously disintegration teaches our ego. So I've been very much actually like unpacking any attachments I have to identities that don't quite feel like they fit at the moment. So I am in flux. Like there's a lot of things I am sorting out in my life as we're all sorting out in our lives, as you know, we lose people and we get sick and we start hearing different calls, and we need to make space to honor those calls and to honor the relationships we want to have. So I'm definitely like in the compost heap. Like the compost heap is like up to my, like this, you can't see it, but I'm like swimming in it. I'm glad you can't smell me either, because it's just like compost. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I like sharing it. Like it's fun and liberating for me to be like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I get to be in the in-between, you know, for as long as I want, right? Because there's this like, what's next? Who are you? What are you doing next? Oh, you're gonna write another book? Oh, you're gonna do another thing? And I'm like, no, I don't know, you know, and that's fine. So I want to give folks permission to be like, I'm not sure. I really don't know, you know.
I do know that I really don't know. I feel that hard. I want to both be really respectful of your time because you and I could talk for days. And if you're okay with it, our coven came excitedly in here when they heard you were going to be here. I also know, Kalika, you're here and you're deep in COVID right now and really sick. So we're just sending you so much love, protection.
I'm sorry, Kalika. I had COVID in the summer and it's really hard, and slowing down and really resting. I know everyone says it, but it's so real to try to recover from this. So my heart goes out to you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think it's so brutal the ways that sometimes we are put to rest, required to rest. Cassandra, I saw you turn your camera on. Do you want to say hi, love? Do it.
Hi, Sarah. I have calmed my tits, but holy moly. I first want to introduce myself by saying thank you so much for your incredible work. You are actually, I think, the first witch that I resonated with just so much, and you've brought so much joy and pleasure and erotic energy into my life. There was a podcast episode I had listened of you, and you had said something like, I'm bringing more erotic into my life, and that has shifted everything for me. So I just really want you to feel my gratitude for you, like a warm bath water washing over you if you need or want. So that's just really what I wanted to say was thank you so much for your work. I adore you, and I'm so grateful that I get to say hi really briefly.
Well, I'm really grateful that you're here. You're so beautiful and you're so alive and you're so erotic. And thank you for reminding me of that too, because we all forget. So I really appreciate you and I really appreciate your support. And I'm glad that you're here. It's so nice to see your beautiful face.
She's a gem and a wise one, that Mama Cass. Yeah. I want to be strict about our time because we both have tender capacity and people we love to tend to. Thank you so much for jumping on with me and for this conversation that I feel like just will continue to spiral together. We have so much more to talk about.
Yes, I'll definitely be having you and Amy on my show, and I look forward to connecting with you and with all of you who are here. I'm sending you so much love. I hope you have as beautiful day as you can make it, and just thank you for being here.
Yeah, and thank you again for your work. You are the very first quote in our new book and one of the very first blurbs, and was definitely someone we were very much inspired by in our thinking about the moon and anti-capitalist witchcraft and the practices of re-enchantment. So here's to that badass community, and be well and blessed if I can be.
Bye.
You must be a witch.
The Missing Witches podcast is created by Risa Dickens and Amy Torok, with insight and support from the Coven at patreon.com/missingwitches. Amy and Risa are the co-authors of Missing Witches, Reclaiming True Histories of Feminist Magic, which is available now wherever you get your books or audiobooks, and of New Moon Magic, 13 anti-capitalist tools for resistance and re-enchantment, coming fall 2023.